All right, here we go. Vlog 3. So I wanted to dive into questing and kind of what I foresee questing to be in MMOs and what I've always wanted questing to be. And it's not too far away from single player RPGs, but I feel like in Pantheon, I don't want questing just to be put in the background, kind of like how it was in EQ. And those of you that are familiar with that, questing really wasn't impactful. It was more of like just something to do rather than it be fully ingrained in the DNA of the game. And that's what I want to see with it. You know, I don't want it to be. I understand with WoW and games coming off from that and the whole hub-based questing and that route of just going from one location to the next, and where the quests almost bring you to the locations rather than you discovering them by yourself. But and that goes along the lines too of fetch quests, and I don't necessarily want fetch quests. I think small quests can be a good thing, you know, short, you know, specific questing could be definitely in the game, but ultimately I want quests to feel impactful and weighty along with the mastery, but ingrained so much in the DNA. I mean, from the aspect of your character's input on the world, and that's kind of through questing and what you see. I don't necessarily want it to be the viable route over grouping, and that's not what I mean. I mean more so in the lines that, you know, based through different areas, you know, questing brings forth a personalization that you have within the world and what the players can connect to ultimately. I feel like with grouping, it's tasks in order to level up, and that's the wheel, that's the hamster wheel you're on, and that's the self-gratification of leveling up and progression and going through this, where questing is more storytelling, and it has more of a storied aspect to your character that allows your character to be influenced by the world, but also to influence the world based on choices, you know. And that's ultimately what I want to see questing to be, is choices you have in dialogue, and also in your choices within, you know, how you can complete a quest itself, you know. And I feel like questing should have multiple different ways, and maybe not every quest, but a good majority of the quests have multiple different ways on how you can complete the quests, and ones that the game doesn't tell you about, ones that you have to use your intuition in order to figure out. And it brings up games like Skyrim and Baldur's Gate and different games like that, you know, good RPGs that allow you to think outside the box and how you can influence, you know, your task, and how you can really carve the story you want to carve for your character. And those changes ultimately impact your character, but they also impact yourself, you know, in a sense, and kind of what your character, what you want him to be like, you know. And it almost brings forth a role-playing element into it too, for those that like role-playing. I do myself, but I feel like the character being able to choose in dialogue, and this makes me think of like games like SWTOR Online. You know, they had a really, really cool system, and a lot of it was, majority of all of it, I'm pretty sure, was voice acted. And I'm not saying that the, you know, VR doesn't have to go that route, because I know it's expensive, and especially when you get into the weeds of different languages and stuff and whatnot. But it still could be read, you know. It doesn't necessarily need to have a voice elements to it. It would be cool if they did, but I really don't hold them to that regard, in order for that to be an impactful system. I think it could very much still your choices be influenced based on just through red text and different options you can choose, you know. Yeah, I think Baldur's Gate did a really good job of this, and I know it's very daunting on the team and offering different multifaceted ways to complete a quest, but it doesn't have to be so dynamic where you don't understand, you know, it gets too complex, you know. I think there should just be, you know, other alternate routes to finish the quest rather than just, you know, go complete these things, bring this to this person, you know, simplistic quests, which, like I said, simplistic quests should still exist, you know. It's tasks that other people are doing. And I would like to see questing, you know, like I said, with it being ingrained in the DNA of the class or of the game, I ultimately mean with the faction system as well. You know, and it stretches. It has little. If you think about it, it has little tentacles and hairs that stretch, vines and roots. Roots, probably the best word. Stretches in, touches every point of the game. You know. And with faction, I feel that faction's just how the game is currently. You know, faction's such an awesome vehicle to open up questing and how players are access to quests. You know, and take for instance the Gadai, right, in Thronefast, Pharaoh, however you say her name, and the other boss NPCs in Fort in that area could really be almost like an alternate space, a questing, not a hub, but like just a village, you know, somewhere that's lived in, that the, you know, players can gain faction rep for the Gadai against the Thronefastian guards and against Thronefast faction itself, you know, to where they can't go into towns like Avelia and such, but they can go to the fort, you know, and they almost go the bandit route of helping them. And then, you know, there's different quests that they need completed and different options based on how you choose. And one other example I was thinking about was, you know, and how this could kind of come into play is, like, say you take, like, say there's a trading company or some shipping company that's coming into Thronefast, and the main people that run the trading company, you know, however that may be, you know, they want to bring in black powder or something, and the King of Thronefast has outlawed black powder from being entered into the city gates. So you necessarily need to go to the official. The main leader of the trading company asked you to bribe the king's official or king's hand in order to get this through to look the other way. And I was thinking maybe you can, like, go to the official's house or the king's hand's residence per se, and you know, maybe they find a note that gives them more information to help you bribe them more. Maybe it's an affair, or he's been stealing gold from the treasury or something, you know, you find in his house to allow you to influence your chances of succeeding in bribing them, you know. And that's where stats can come into play, especially with charisma and such, of, you know, how the bard can be naturally better at convincing people or being more charismatic in certain situations. And maybe, like Baldur's Gate did with offering different aspects to racials, of allowing different dialogue paths and whatnot. And I feel like that's just super impactful. And I know it's really complex, but it doesn't necessarily have to be initially. You know, you can always add to it and bring forth questing more in depth and add more things to it. But I think it'd be a really miss if they didn't go this route. And I just don't want questing to just be an additive rather than planned from the beginning of the game. So that's what I wanted to talk about with questing. If you guys had any questions, or I'd love to hear what you guys think in the comments. Please let me know, and I would love to read those. But thanks for your time. I'll talk to you later.